Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cass and today we are going to be doing my April reading wrap up. I had a really good reading month, okay? So I got through a total of 13 books. They weren't all books from my prompts, but I did get 8 out of 12 of my prompts from my TBR video completed. And I'm in the middle of my 9th one. So I'll talk about that one at the end. I will finish it in May. Let's get into it. So the first book I read was A Crane Among Wolves by June Her. And this was a great book. This was a YA standalone political fantasy, like historical political fantasy, that I don't even know how it got recommended to me, but someone somewhere recommended it to me and I had it on my Goodreads. It was available at the library. It sounded good. I picked it up. The focus is on the historical fantasy political aspect. And then there's a subplot of romance. And the subplot of romance is done exactly how I like it. This is taking place in the early 1500s in Korea, and it's based on true historical events as far as the political stance goes. So they had a tyrannic leader that took over the country. His mother died, and he kind of went crazy and became major dictator, okay? And just scary, violent, harsh, can't reason with him. Everyone was scared of him. He was taking over the kingdom, and our female main character, she's 17. She comes from an affluent family. She's always lived a pretty, sheltered, cushy life. As this king takes over, he begins collecting women. He begins collecting them in his palace like concubines. We're talking like 30, 40, 50, up to like 100 women that like parade around, and he just does whatever he wants. He has them for his company. He assaults them. They live at the palace, but it's very strict. So Isol's older sister is taken by the king, and Isol is determined to save her sister. She realizes that her sister really got the short end of the stick growing up, that she really looked out for her, and that even though they had kind of grown apart and become a little bit of estranged, that she still loves her sister and she is going to save her. And then on the other side of the palace walls, we have Desayun, who is the tyrannical king's half-brother. So they shared a father, but had a different mother. But the king's mother raised Desayun as if he was her own. He loved her very, very much. And he knows that his brother is going crazy. He knows that his brother is a threat to the kingdom, to the people, and is not ultimately going to lead them and take care of the kingdom in a way that is best for everyone anymore. But he's super violent and dangerous, and in order to remove him from his seat, there's a lot at risk, right? He is towing the line between watching the people in the kingdom suffer and watching his half-brother deteriorate into this psychosis, knowing that his life is also in danger as the next in line for the king's seat. His brother is very skeptical of him, and so he's constantly unsure if he can trust him and constantly threatening to kill him and making him do these absurd things to prove his loyalty to him. Meanwhile, there's a serial killer, like a rebel killer, going around killing people throughout the kingdom, and it appears as if this killer is targeting royalty, is targeting the palace, is targeting the government or people associated with the government. The king is convinced that it's this serial killer who also killed his mother. He wants this serial killer found and brought to him so he can serve justice for his mom. So he sets Desayun, his half-brother, on this mission. His mission is to find the killer. And Isol, meanwhile, realizes that her best bet of getting to the king and getting inside the palace alive and getting her sister out alive is to solve the murders to be able to serve up the serial killer to the king. So Desayun and Isol cross paths, and the story progresses from there. So we're kind of following this murder mystery, trying to figure out who the killer is. And then we've got the plot line of Isol trying to get into the palace to save her sister without dying herself or getting them both killed. We've got Desayun trying to keep his brother from destroying everything in his wake to help the people, but also not to die in the process. Besides a really subtle, slow burn romance, Desayun and Isol also start coming up with a plan together for how to remove the tyrannical king, how to save the people, how to save her sister without losing their own lives. It's really good. And I love that it's a standalone. There's some mature content, but I would say that this is good for anyone 13 plus. And as I was reading it, I definitely wasn't feeling like, oh, this is totally a YA book. Like it is, but it was really, really good. You know, there's YA books that feel like the whole time you're reading them, you're like, this is totally YA. And then there's YA books that you're like, wow, that was YA? That's how this book was. I didn't get that 5-star feeling, but objectively, it's a very good book. I really enjoyed it. I ended up rating it 4.75. It's very relevant to, unfortunately, all of the things that are going on in the United States right now. So there was, obviously taking place hundreds of years ago in a different country, in a different time period, but it's based on a true story, a true king that lived that way, that reigned tyranny on his kingdom and killed a lot of people, ruined a lot of people's lives. So highly recommend that book. Let's move on to the next one. I'm sorry, real quick, if you end up hearing the wind or anything like banging. We're having a massive windstorm right now. So apologies ahead of time. It's like beautiful and sunny outside, but the wind is blowing insane. The next book I read was Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel. Hopefully I said that correctly. And this is the same author as Kaikei. If you've read that, same author. I've really come to love this author's writing. I think she'll be an auto-buy author for me. I believe I rated Kaikei 4.75 stars. I didn't quite get that 5-star feeling, but it was stunning. And these are basically Indian mythology retellings. Her writing is just beautiful. I visited India, and so I have like a little soft spot in my heart for India. I spent a couple of weeks there, and I have a lot of appreciation for the lore, for the culture, for the architecture. And so I'm always really drawn to books that have Indian lore, Indian settings, etc. Goddess of the River is a retelling of the goddess Ganga. She is the goddess of the river. As the story goes, Ganga looks out for all of the little godlings that come to her riverbanks. Along the way, she gets tangled up in something and she becomes cursed. And this curse is that she becomes mortal. So she goes from being a goddess to a mortal body, but she still remembers her god life. So she knows she's a god. She knows she's cursed. And she has things she has to do in order to break the curse and go back to her goddess form. So while she's on Earth, she ends up wedding the king. She does this to set herself up to be able to break the curse. I'm not going to give you all the details because that would be spoilers, but she does end up being able to break the curse, and in the process goes back to her goddess form, but ends up leaving her infant son behind. She, as a goddess again, is always thinking about him and worrying about him and wanting to know how he's doing. As the people in the kingdom and around him come to her riverbanks and pray and ask for things and tell her their stories, she slowly, she gets little bits and pieces about what is happening with her son, what is happening with the kingdom, and she begins to become invested as a god in this kingdom, where in her life previously, she was just neutral. She just, hung out at the river and didn't try to influence the human culture on Earth in any one way. She just provided for them when she could. Now as a goddess, she is becoming invested. And we see her now having these flaws that are that of a human mother, And she's never experienced this before. This is such a foreign feeling to her. This is such a foreign predicament that she is in. And she keeps going to other gods in the god realm, asking for help. She does things that they tell her not to do. And she entangles herself with the humans and tries to intervene in ways that she never got involved before. Subsequently, she ends up learning more and more about what it's like to be human, what the value of human, like of a mortal life is, why mortal life and mortality has value even though we die, even though our lives are short and we die compared to the gods. And so there's a theme running through it that's kind of existential. So if you like books that make you question the purpose of life, if you like existentialism, if you like mythology, if you like Indian lore, if you enjoyed Circe, if you enjoyed Kaikeyi, anything like that, I think that you would really enjoy this book. I ended up loving it. I love books that explore existentialism. I really do. Those are always end up being my favorite books. And I rated this one 5 stars. Next on my list was Shadows and Storms, which is the 4th and final book in the Legends of Thesmar series. And I have been trying to finish that series for a very long time. I binge read the first 3 books, knowing that the 4th book was coming out like the next month, and I intended to read it right away with those first 3 books really fresh in my mind. But then my personal life went insane, and there was a lot going on, and I just didn't get to it as quickly as I thought I would. So I did finally get to it, and I did have to kind of refresh myself on what happened in the first 3 books before moving on to the 4th book. But I do think that she does a very good job of referencing what happens in those books, because if you read those books in the order that they came out, there was a time, there's always a gap between each book, right? So assuming that your reader is not going to reread the book before, you need to, make callbacks to the last book or to the series leading up to it to remind the reader kind of what's at stake, details that may be important that were in the other books. And so I think she did a good job. I basically just went over the summaries of the first 3 books. I went back because I own the books and read just like the last few chapters, like really quickly skimmed the last few chapters of the 3rd book just to like remind myself where we left off, and then went into the 4th book. I listened to it on Audible because I bought it, last year when it first came out. And I recommend the audiobooks. They're very good. I think that this is, if I had to rate the books in order, this isn't my least favorite book, but it's probably like my second to least favorite book. I really liked it. I didn't have a problem with how it ended. I know a lot of people had different critiques about the book. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't get that like 5-star, like, yes, like that was the best series ever. I didn't get that feeling. Like it wasn't like the Throne of Glass feeling. That's what I'm always comparing series to, because every time I finish Throne of Glass, I'm just like, that's the best series ever. Like, oh, and I just like, I'm blown away, and I'm on this high, and I didn't have that feeling. I don't know if I would have felt differently had I read the books all consecutively like I originally planned. Nonetheless, this is where I stand. I obviously can't really give you a synopsis. If you're reading the books, you can go look at the summary, but if you haven't read the first 3 books, don't read the summary of the 4th book because you might accidentally get spoiled for something. But what I will say is that it was engaging. I read it within like a matter of 2 days, I think, and I rated it 4 stars. And I would say that overall, I would give the entire series as a whole a 4.25. It's a good series. I recommend it. There's also a decent amount of spice. So if you really like romantasy that's heavy on the political fantasy part and has a lot of spice, then definitely pick up this series. I did really enjoy it. I will recommend it to my friends. I am happy. I have, you can't see it, but up here, I have the books on my shelf. And mainly I was so excited because she just came out with her first book in the spin-off series, which was Iron and Embers, which is the next book we're going to talk about. And this came out just a couple of months ago. And we are following, so in the first book, we're following Thea and Wilder. And in this series, we are following Thea's sister and another character. But I'm not going to give away any of that because that would be a spoiler for the first series. But we're following 2 other characters. So I love these characters. I'm actually so glad that they are the ones featured in this series. I finished that book, and that was actually like the catalyst for me to finally pick up that 4th book and finish, was because I wanted to move on to Iron and Embers. Iron and Embers was really good. I was loving it all the way up to the very end. I love the characters. They still had pretty much most of all of the same side characters from the first book, which I appreciated because I really love side characters. Like, when there's good side characters, they are everything to me. And this Legends of Thesmar has good side characters. Okay, the friends are top notch, and they also are in this second series. So that made me really happy. I was loving it. I was like getting the 5-star feeling. And then we got to the very end, and I was shooketh. I was shooketh. The end of that book really got me, and not in a good way. Like, I hated it. I hated the way it ended. And unfortunately, that brought my rating down. So I ended up rating it 4 stars. I'm telling you, it was 5 stars, and then the very ending brought it down to a 4-star. It didn't turn me off from the series or anything. It definitely left me in a position where I will be picking up the next book in the series. I just didn't like it. It's not where I thought it was going. It's not what I wanted to happen. I think I've seen a lot of similar feedback from other people. Also, sorry, this wind storm is moving the clouds, and my natural light is like kind of coming and going. Okay, I've added a little bit of my ring light here to help, but I don't know, it might fluctuate. The sun might come out again. I'm not sure. I apologize for lighting changes throughout this. Anyways, definitely, I recommend the Legend of Thesmar series. I recommend Iron and Embers. I will be looking forward to the next book in that series, and I will definitely be picking it up. Next up on my April reads was Blood Over Brighthaven. This was my favorite book of the whole month, and is probably going to be in my top 3 favorites for the entire year. I was unprepared for how much I was going to love this book. Okay, I read Sword of Kaigen last year. I loved it. I knew I loved her writing. I knew she was a great storyteller. The author is M.L. Wong, and she writes standalone fantasies, which are really hard to find. And this one, so good. I knew that I loved Sword of Kaigen and that I rated that 5 stars. Yeah, I don't know why I put off reading it so long, but I'm just so glad I did, because the timing ended up being perfection. I buddy read this book with Kara over at Kara's Bookshelves, and I also reeled my best friend Lynn into reading it with me. I was like, stop what you're doing, pick up this book and read it with me right now, because I need people to freak out with me over this book. It's so good. I think we all gave it 5 stars. I mean, I gave it 6 stars. It was fantastic. Let me tell you about the book. This is going to be one of the books I never shut up about. And I'm actually going to be doing another episode featuring this book. So I will go into more detail then. But let me give you a quick synopsis. We are following our FMC, who has been training her entire life to become a mage. She wants to go to the High Mage University, but it's really unheard of for a girl to get in. They only allow females into the Mage Academy, this High Mage Academy, once every 10 years. So it's basically men. This is the year. This is the year that they are going to open it up to women. And she has been practicing and training and devoted her entire life to doing this. This is all she cares about. She has a mentor who is a high mage at the academy. So she has a really good foot in the door. He's been training her. So she goes to the audition or the tryouts. She ends up landing a spot there. But despite doing amazing things and blowing them away with what she can do, she still is facing major sexism because she's the only woman. She gets her own science lab where she's going to be at the university, at this academy. And every high mage has an assistant, but they're it would be too too degrading to give you one of our assistants because they're men, and to have a man, like one of the male assistants under a woman, would be just, really degrading. We're gonna just, here, take our male janitor. He is now going to be your assistant. The male janitor is a Quen. A Quen is basically an outsider, basically an immigrant. They are living inside of this city that is just under like a dome of protection, okay? It's kind of separate from all of the outside world, and Quen are people who have immigrated from outside of this dome in other places of the world and made it into their city alive. Because most immigrants who try to come to their city, most Quen who try to come to their city, don't make it there alive. They are killed by the Blight, which is this unknown source of death that is happening outside of this dome of protection where they live. This Quen, this janitor, he tried to immigrate with the last of his tribe to the city, and everyone except for him and his niece were killed by the Blight. So he and his niece are the only ones of his tribe that survived. There is no one left. He's trying to raise his niece and survive. These Quen, or these immigrants, are definitely below them. There is a class system, and they are at the bottom of the human class totem pole. They believe that they are inherently less intelligent, less capable, that they have to be, trained, that they are kind of dangerous, have to be careful with them, almost as if they're like animals that might turn around and bite you. So this Quen becomes her assistant. She is teaching him how to help her. Through this process, she realizes, no, he's actually not dumb. He's pretty smart. Actually, he knows a lot. Actually, he's capable of learning a lot. Like, he doesn't really seem the way I've always been told Quen are. And we start to kind of see some of his past. We see his tribe. We see where they came from. So our female mage is Siona. And this Quen assistant that was the janitor that has now suddenly become her assistant, his name is Tamil. And Tamil and Siona begin talking and getting to know each other while they're doing these experiments and doing this magic science. And everyone at the academy is trying to solve a problem. They're in a competition. They have like less than 3 months to find the answer to this spell that is kind of incomplete. So the entire town is called Tiran, Tiran, that is in this like bubble, okay? Basically, everything they do runs off of magic. Their power source is magic. Everything is magic. So it's kind of the equivalent of electricity and energy in our lives. So everything the way they grow their food, the way they run their appliances, the way they run their light, their cars, everything they do is powered. Their energy source is magic. They are running out of sources to siphon magic. They believe there's other sources of magic out there, but they don't really know how to find it or where it is exactly. And so the high mages or the new mages have been tasked with trying to solve this equation. They have like a partial spell, but they need to complete the spell. They need to find the correct spell that will allow them to expand their vision outside of this city where they live to find other sources of magic for them to use, because they're running out of energy. They're running out of magic to siphon. Of course, there's an element of sexism because we have Siona. Obviously, right off the bat, they only hire women, like they only allow women into the school once every 10 years. They believe they're dangerous to let in, that they're unstable, that they will cause problems with the magic system. So she's there. She's working in an entirely male domain. She's facing sexism all over the place, but she's also realizing that there's classism happening as she gets to know Tamil, and she realizes that he's smarter than they believe, that they've always been taught, that they've always been told. There's a religious element mixed in with all of the magic system and the academy and the schooling. Basically, there's no separation of church and state. It's all kind of mingled together, and the high mages are everything. So they are like the religious leadership, the political leadership, and the educational leadership. They are everything. This book, it just tackles everything I've ever wanted in one book. I'll insert a B-roll here of what my annotations look like. And like I said, we will be talking about this book more, but I tabbed the hell out of this book. It is so good. It is so relatable to what's going on in the world right now. There are plot twists that are just chef's kiss. It's the kind of reading experience that readers live for. I mean, I was like on cloud nine. It was incredible. I think that my friends who read the book felt exactly the same way. We were losing our minds about how good this book was. So many quotes. I mean, please, just pick this book up. Please, if you have not read this book and you like fantasy, especially if you've been looking for a standalone and you like political fantasy, pick this baby up. You will not regret it. Excellent book. We will be talking about it more in a future video, but let's move on for today. Okay, now I think the wind is bringing in a storm, and so now it got suddenly like dark and gray outside. So I don't think our lighting is going to improve. It is still the afternoon, but it has gotten very dark in here, if you couldn't tell. So I have turned on my ring light, and we're just going to finish that way. The next book that I read was Sorcery of Small Magics, and this is what I would call a cozy fantasy with a subplot of romance. So we're following mages again, but this is a class of male mages, and we have two mages that are kind of enemies. They're like arch nemesis, and they're forced to work together for a project. In the process, one of the mages accidentally curses the other mage with a forbidden magic spell. He did not know that it was a forbidden magic spell. He didn't know it was going to curse him. So somehow his spell book was messed with, and he thought that he was doing a different spell, but it ended up being this curse. Now, here's the problem. The one mage over here, they don't like each other. They don't like each other, and now he has a compulsion to follow whatever this guy says. So that's not good. But then this guy is the one who cursed him, even though it was an accident. It's forbidden magic. And if the school finds out that he used forbidden magic, then he can be expelled from the school. So neither of them they're both very invested in breaking this curse and figuring out what went wrong, because he doesn't want to be under a compulsion spell, and he doesn't want to get kicked out for using forbidden magic. They go on this journey together to figure out where the curse came from, how it ended up in the spell book, why, how to break it, etc. So there's a little bit of a quest or journey element. There's a very subtle like enemies to lovers element, but I would say that this is mainly just a cozy fantasy. Now, I have failed to figure out why I love some cozy fantasies and why I don't like others. I am super, super picky when it comes to cozy fantasies. For a while I thought, okay, I just don't like cozy fantasies. It's not my thing. But then every once in a while I will read one that I don't even realize is a cozy fantasy, and I love it. So then I'm like, oh, well, no, I do like some cozy fantasies. This was one that's just not my cup of tea. I got really bored. It's sweet. It's cute. It's cozy. There's really nothing wrong with it. It's just not my cup of tea. So I rated this book 3.5. But if you love cozy fantasy, and also if you're looking for like male on male love representation, if you like mage schools, anything like that, definitely pick this up. I mean, it was a good time, but it's just not my favorite. There's other books I'd rather be reading. Now my kitties really want in, so you might hear them. Okay, so next I read Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. This is more of like a magical realism book, historical magical realism. So this takes place, I think, in like the 50s or the 60s, and we're following this girl who becomes pregnant, and her father takes her to this house in the South away from civilization, basically where they hide unwed pregnant women, because that was very, very frowned upon at the time and could bring a lot of shame on to the families, right? So the agreement is that they go to this house, the Wayward house, where they're able to live. They feed them. They have them do labor around the house, like work, and make sure they get all their medical care. And in exchange, they give their babies up for adoption when they have them. The families who are adopting pay for all of the bills, pay for everything. And so it's like a win-win situation. So we're following this girl as she comes to the Wayward house, and we're meeting all the other girls that are there, and we're getting to know their different stories and how they each became, pregnant, unwed, how they ended up there, what their families are like at home. And sometimes it's, a boyfriend who they were necking with and they just got pregnant. Some of them are like, oh, I'm going to marry my boyfriend when I get back. We're going to raise this baby together. Some of them are not such great situations, right? Think, assault. These girls kind of bond over just these different situations and being pregnant and not having the support that they need from, friends and family. And they do schooling and everything while they're there. Now, there is a bus, a library bus that comes to the house every few weeks and brings them books. They all get super excited about being able to get books from the library truck. So one time the truck comes, the librarian suggests a book to one of the girls. It's a book about becoming a witch, different spells you can do and that kind of thing. The girl takes it. She becomes very intrigued by it. And something distressing happens at the house. And she decides, what the heck? We have no other options. Let's give it a try. Let's try this spell book. These girls, this handful of girls, they do a spell and it works. The spell works. And they're like, whoa, wait. And so they start exploring this book more and the lifestyle that comes with being a witch and witchcraft. And as they are, exploring this path, they get themselves and the Wayward house into some troubling and dangerous situations. Meanwhile, throughout the story, we are learning about what girls were facing during that time period. Obviously, again, a lot of sexism, the heartbreak of having to carry a baby and not being able to keep it. These girls, they just weren't even given a choice. Some of the abuse that happened back then. I love this book. If you've been around at my channel at all, you know that I love all things witchy. I am a witch at heart. And I know that a lot of people on booktube say this all the time. Grady is really great at writing female characters and understanding the way women think and act, the dynamics between women, the dynamics of female friendships. It was really interesting. It was a good time. I gave it 4 stars. I purchased a copy to keep on my shelf. I annotated it. There are a lot of quotes that I loved in it. And I will probably pick up more of Grady Hendrix books. If you love magical realism, like a touch of horror, definitely pick it up. The next book that I read was The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And I have had this on my TBR for years now. And I finally decided to pick it up. We're starting with our main character when he is a boy and his mom dies. That's not a spoiler. That happens right at the very beginning. And so he lives with his father, and his father is a bookseller. And he takes him to the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, which is a secret kind of tomb of books that have been forgotten, that are like no longer in circulation, have been banned, or they're on the cuff of extinction, basically. Like they are at risk for us losing this work forever and ever. This is in Barcelona, Spain. Takes place in Barcelona, Spain, which I loved the setting. In 1945, so just after World War II is coming to a close. And we're seeing Barcelona and all of the damaging effects of World War II, all of the aftermath. And we see that throughout the book, even for decades afterwards. Okay, so Daniel goes to the Cemetery of Forgotten Books with his dad, and his dad says, you can pick out, you're old enough now, you can pick out any book. You get to pick one book. Which book calls to you from this library? And he is really drawn to this one book, and he picks it up, and it's a book called The Shadow of the Wind by Julian Carricks. So right off the bat, I knew I was going to enjoy this book because it's a book about books, right? The title of this book is The Shadow of the Wind, and Daniel picks the book off of the shelf that's called The Shadow of the Wind. And he falls in love with this book. He feels connected to it. He becomes kind of obsessed with it. He reads it all the time. He knows the story by heart. He is obsessed. He's like, I love this author's work. I want to find more of his books. And he starts to go on a quest to find the author, Julian Carrick's, and see what other books he had written. He wants to get his hands on them because he just loves this author's writing. He takes his book with him everywhere he goes, and he encounters different people. He encounters like a bookseller, a book dealer who kind of specializes in rare books, who tries to buy the book from him. And he says, no, this is not, it's priceless. I just want this book, but can you tell me if there's more? And as he's on this quest to find out whatever happened to Julian Carrick's, where are his other books? Because it's, there's lore, there's rumors out there that Julian Carrick's wrote more than one book, but that is the only book that is left. And he's like, I'm going to find the other ones. And on this journey, he starts running into kind of bad luck. Along this journey, he finds out that the reason why there are no more Julian Carrick's books is because they've all been destroyed. And, people say they were cursed. They were all burned in a fire. Like every book that he ever wrote that was ever like published, was burned. And then we're split into two timelines. We continue to follow Daniel. And we follow him as he grows up, as he goes on this quest, as he starts to date, as he falls in love, kind of goes through these life events. And we see that his obsession with this book and trying to solve this mystery really takes over his life. It really becomes his main focus, and he ends up neglecting a lot of other things around him in order to complete this quest that he's set for himself, including straining his relationship with his father. And then we're also going back in time now as different pieces of the puzzle are coming, and we're following Julian Carrick's life. We're following, his life leading up to writing, things that happened while he was writing, and the reason why all of his books were burned. We're flipping back and forth between these two point of views, these two different timelines, and we're starting to make connections. The writing is stunning, like beautiful, beautiful writing. The setting was amazing and so realistic. I felt like I was living in Barcelona in post-war times. I felt like I really knew the characters. They felt very real to me. There was a lot of wisdom in it. There were so many quotes. I want to reread the book and annotate it because I was listening to it, and I do recommend the narration, but I really want to read the book physically because the prose were so amazing and there was just so many good quotes. By the end of the book, I felt like the characters were real people and that I was going to miss them. This book is definitely more of like a literary fiction style where it's very character driven. We are learning about characters. We're trying to understand why they are the way they are. We are following a character arc. We are studying relationships, the dynamics of like society and family and war, how it affects people and families and generations. We're discussing the importance of literature. And there's a mystery plot, it's kind of driving the plot. There's a mystery of like, why did all of his books end up burned? Why is this the only book? So there's definite mystery and intrigue, but this is 100% a character-based book. If you liked A Secret History, I think you would really like this book too. I would say that I liked it even better. We don't have like the academic setting, but it's very similar in that it's like beautiful writing, really good analysis of human behavior, really interesting like character arcs with the like mystery moving the plot forward. And I rated this book 4.75, and that's just because I have nothing but good things to say about it. It just didn't give me that like 5-star feeling, but I was so excited to discover this author. I will definitely be picking up his other books, and I think there's for sure potential for at least one of his other books to be 5 stars because I definitely vibe with his style of writing and storytelling.
Hey, good morning. I decided to finish this morning because it was getting way too crazy outside and way too dark inside. So here we are. I do have a little bit of allergies now this morning from all of the wind, so I apologize if I sound a little croaky. Let's talk about the next book. So the next book that I read was A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. I've read a lot of her books. She's a pretty solid author, so I tend to pick up whatever she's releasing. And I was excited to pick this up. This is a story about a woman who's going back to the small town in the mountains where she grew up because her twin brother passed away. And they don't really have any other family, and she has to come back and take care of business. But it's obvious that she doesn't want to be there. She's avoided going back to this small town. She's just there because she has to be, but she left for a reason. So she and her twin brother were really close growing up, and she left as an adult because she wanted to get out of that small town and went to be part of the art scene in San Francisco. Her brother stayed behind. He was working on a photography project, photographing these owls that are going extinct in a campaign to try to save the owls. And she set her brother up with this job because he never really had he wasn't super ambitious, didn't really have big life goals. She always kind of looked out for him growing up. And then he passes away. So she decides she's going to come back to the town, take care of business, and also wrap up this photography project for him and for her contact in the business that she connected with her brother. So she doesn't want to leave this guy hanging, and she wants to finish this project for both him and her brother. So she comes back to the small town. You can tell that she hasn't been back in a very long time. She doesn't really want to be there, but she's going to do what she has to do. She is working with their mutual best friend, Griffin, he was basically like their triplet. So it was her and her brother and Griffin, who was their best friend. And there's a reason why she hasn't been back to the town. And as the story unfolds, we find out more about that reason, why she left, also why her brother and Griffin stayed. When she returns to the town, she's always had this really strong twin bond with her brother, silent connection where she feels what he's feeling, and she hears him talking to her even when they're not together. And as she returns to the town, she starts to see her brother in different places and kind of get different messages from him. So this is kind of like a magical realism, paranormal element to it. And she gets the feeling that his death that was ruled an accident may not have really been an accident. And she's trying to figure this out, why she feels this way, while wrapping up everything at their childhood home, getting his memorial taken care of, and finishing up the owl project. So there's definitely this mystery kind of element going through it. If you've read any of her other books, it's definitely got that vibe. Unfortunately, didn't love this book. This is not one of my favorites of hers. I ended up rating this book 3.5. It was good. And it's a good kind of palate cleanser or fluff read between heavier books or between fantasies. There were some really good elements. It was a good little murder mystery type of deal, but I wasn't wowed by it as much as I have been from other books that she's written. So, 3.5 is good, but it's just average. It's good. I would recommend it if it sounds like it's up your alley. The next book I read was All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker, I believe. I knew nothing about this book going into it. I just knew that a lot of people were raving about it. I knew some people said it was their favorite book of the entire year last year. And I put it on hold at my library. I think I literally have been waiting for 6 months for this book. I finally got it. I picked it up. It was really good. I'm glad that I went into it not knowing anything and not really having too many expectations of it. This book takes place in Missouri in I believe it's the 1970s is where we start out, but we follow a very long time period. And we start out in this small town where there's a little boy and a little girl, Saint and Patch. And Saint lives with her grandmother and Patch lives with his mother, but his mother is an alcoholic. She's not usually around. She's often drunk. He's often taking care of her. And they're very young kids. And, he's pretty much neglected. And the entire town knows it, but they all kind of watch out for him, but allow him to keep living there with his mother. So Saint and Patch are backyard neighbors in this rural town, and they become playmates. And once Saint's grandmother realizes that Patch is kind of neglected by his mom, she kind of watches out for him, is always making sure he gets food, inviting him over to play, making sure, he's not too neglected. And meanwhile, all of these girls are going missing in the area. And suddenly it comes to their town, and one of the girls, who's pretty well off and pretty popular in school, has an attempted abduction but Patch jumps in to rescue her, and he is taken instead. So this girl comes back and tells her story, says, we have to help him. He saved me. He's missing. And they're searching for Patch. And Saint is like dedicated to finding Patch. He's her best friend. There's no way, no how she's going to let him go missing. Like, she's not going to let them give up on finding Patch. So long story short, after all of law enforcement has been looking for him and all of these things have happened, Saint is playing detective by herself, and she actually is the one who ends up saving Patch. This happens very early on in the book, so this isn't a major spoiler. This is kind of the foundation for the rest of the story. So she saves Patch, but where Patch was being held, there was another girl named Grace. And they became like trauma bonded, right? They spent all of that time together, months have gone by, and they become trauma bonded. And so Patch is found and rescued, but Grace is never found. And the fact that they couldn't find Grace just haunts Patch. He cannot let it go. He insists on finding Grace. Everyone starts to believe there's no evidence of this other girl being there. They can't find evidence of a girl matching the description missing anywhere. Eventually, the case kind of goes cold, but Patch won't give it up, and Saint promises to help him find this girl. And so we have these two kids who are best friends. Saint has already cracked the first case. Now they're going to work together to find Grace. But most of the town has decided that this is a delusion that he made up to cope with his abduction, that Grace probably doesn't actually exist. And so no one is helping them. After a time, no one is helping them. And for the rest of the book, we're following Saint and Patch as they grow up together, kind of the aftermath of this abduction on each of them, on their friendship, on the town, and then this haunting that Patch has of this missing girl who was with him that he just cannot let go. We follow Patch clear to adulthood, Saint to adulthood, and we see how these experiences as children really shaped who they became as adults. And their paths are intertwined, and they both are on their own mission to find this girl that, supposedly was with Patch when he was abducted. It's a very long timeline. There's quite a bit of suspense and mystery happening, but there's also major character development. There's a lot of analysis on human behavior and relationships and trauma. It's a really haunting and beautiful story. If you liked Demon Copperhead, then I think you would like this book. It has a similar feel where we're following characters all through their lifetime, kind of the pitfalls, the things that have haunted them, the things in the system that have affected them. I ended up really loving this book. I gave it 5 stars, and it's a book that I will think about for a very long time. It hit on some topics that are very personal for me, so this is very right book at the right time. However, I think objectively, it's also a very fantastic book, and it's very highly rated. So if this sounds up your alley, definitely pick it up. One of the themes in the book that I really loved was this idea that trauma changes us, fundamentally changes who we are and who we become, and how oftentimes the people around us, when they don't understand our trauma, kind of just move on or want us to move on, and they don't understand how trauma actually changes a person. And that is an aspect of this book that I really appreciated. So if any of that resonates with you, I would say pick this book up. So at this point, I had read a couple of heavier, kind of spookier almost books that were more haunting, and I needed something light. So I decided to pick up Emily Henry's new book, Great Big Beautiful Life. Now this was very different from her other books. It follows 2 authors who are on this island for this long lost celebrity who kind of went into hiding and no one ever saw her or heard from her again. She supposedly lives on this island now, and she's willing to tell her story for the first time. And they're both there to be the one to tell her story. And she's invited both of them to interview her, to sit down with her, to work with her for 1 month, and then she would choose which one of them would be awarded basically her memoir, would be able to tell her story. This is important to both of them. This is their life's work. They've been working towards this, and for different reasons. They each have their own reasons for why this is very important. And they have to sign these NDAs, so they can't talk about the things that they're discussing with her, of course. But not only can they not share it with the public or anyone else, they also can't share it with each other. And so as we're going through the story, we find that this celebrity has telling both of them kind of different stories or different facts. And they both get the feeling that she's lying to them or that she's not really telling them the whole truth. But they feel like they can't really divulge what they're each learning because of the NDAs that they have signed. So in the beginning of the story, they're competitors. They don't really like each other. They're competing for this job. They don't intend on being friends, and they have opposite schedules with her. So their paths don't really cross. But like, she goes there like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and he's there like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or whatever. So they're not really crossing paths as far as the interview time goes, but they are crossing paths outside of interview times because it's a very small town. It's an island. There's like not a whole lot of places to eat, not a whole lot of things to do. So they keep running into each other. And what starts out as kind of a, competition, enemies type of thing turns into maybe we need to work together to actually get this whole story. Like a lot of Emily Henry books, this is more of a general fiction with just a subplot of romance. I really feel like the romance in this book was secondary. That is not the part I think about. This is more character development of our two writers and the celebrity and kind of trying to solve the mystery. So if you liked The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, then I would recommend picking up this book. It has very similar vibes. For that same reason, it wasn't my favorite book of Emily Henry's because it just felt, it's definitely different. It's different. It has a different story. I really enjoyed it, but it didn't rock my world the same way that The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo did. So I gave this book a 4.5 and I would recommend it, but it was very different. It's not like her other books. There's a lot more kind of mystery happening to it. And it's a little bit different style than the way she typically writes. It definitely still has the Emily Henry feel overall. You can tell that it's an Emily Henry book, but it's like she's going out on a branch. She's kind of doing something a little different. And so I'm curious to see what her next book will be like. If you typically read all of her books and you read this one, let me know down in the comments what you thought. Did you like this one? Where did it fall with the others? Did you like this slight style change? Okay, moving on. The next book I read this was a book that I picked for one of my prompts, and it was Don't Forget to Write by Sarah Confino. And this is on Kindle Unlimited, I believe. So, but I listened to this book. It either was included or I purchased the audio for like really cheap. So this book I very highly rated. All of her books are actually really highly rated. And I knew that this was just going to be like a kind of a fluff filler book. It ended up being much better than I thought it was going to be. I really enjoyed it. I would definitely pick up another one of her books. So in this story, we are following a young lady who has been at college and she comes home for the summer and she's pretty restless. Her family is Jewish. They're anxious for her to marry a nice Jewish boy, but she has other plans. She wants to have a career. She doesn't know if she wants to get married and have children. She's also kind of rebellious, and so she's out dating and kind of getting into trouble. She ends up making out with the rabbi's son at an event in the back of the church. And when it's found that they're kissing, everyone freaks out. Her parents freak out. The rabbi's family freaks out. And essentially, the rabbi's son is set up to come and ask her to marry him, all because they were making out in the back of the church. Now, this is taking place like in the mid-century times. So this is decades ago. And she's like, no way, I'm not going to marry him just because I kissed him. Like, this is ridiculous. And her dad is very strict Jewish man. And he's like, either you marry this man, you either get engaged to this guy, or we're sending you away to go live with your aunt, this aunt she's never even heard of, for the summer. And she'll whip you back into shape, and then we'll decide if you're going to be allowed to go back to college. Like, we don't know if we can trust you to go back to college. You might just be making out with all of these boys and you need to get married. So her mother's kind of like on her side. She's kind of the mediator between her dad and her. So ultimately she refuses to get engaged. And so she gets sent off to live with this aunt that she's never heard of. And she spends the whole summer with her. She's super strict. She won't let her wear lipstick. She has strict curfew. She's really in her business, okay? But this aunt, she's a Jewish matchmaker. So her job, like, she's well known for setting up matches for marriage, especially in the Jewish community. And so in order to keep an eye on this girl for the summer, she has to come around with her for all of her matchmaking stuff and kind of like be her assistant. And in the process, she's kind of teaching her the art of matchmaking and how to pick a good partner and what partnerships will work and what won't, you know, and how to kind of know yourself and know what you need, etc. So these are kind of like the underlying things that are happening. She's very strict, won't let her date, but of course she meets a boy there. And she starts sneaking out and seeing this boy, and trouble ensues. Okay. So this book was really fun. It's like a comfort read. I could actually see myself reading it again because it was very enjoyable. It was low stakes. It was funny. I laughed out loud quite a bit. It was sweet. It had some really sweet sentiments. It had some wisdom in it. And there was a plot twist that I didn't fully see coming. So that was kind of fun. If you're looking for something kind of light, enjoyable, something that doesn't take like too much brain power, very rom-com vibes, then I would recommend this book. The last book that I finished in April was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. Abby is my girl. I just love Abby. Definitely my favorite contemporary fiction romance author. I absolutely just love her writing, love her stories, and this is the first book in her next trilogy. So in this book, we are following Xavier and Samantha. Xavier is a veterinarian who is very broody and quiet and keeps to himself. He's kind of like the grumpy guy. This is very like grumpy sunshine kind of trope. And Samantha is very bubbly and she's very quick-witted, she's smart, and she's sassy, she doesn't put up with a whole lot of BS, and she kind of calls it like it is. And per usual, there are just the most ridiculous, hilarious circumstances happening in this book. And we start off by Samantha finding this kitten that's abandoned, taking it to the vet where she meets Xavier to get her fixed up, finding out that this little kitty doesn't have a bum hole. Like, this little kitty probably going to die. And she's like, well, how do we fix it? And he's like, it's not worth it. I recommend that you put this kitten down. And she's like, I am not putting this kitten down. She's super stubborn. So one, she wants to save the kitten, but two, she also wants to prove Xavier wrong, that it is worth it to try to save the kitten and that the kitten can have the surgery and she's going to save this kitten. So of course she ends up saving the kitten, right? And then she comes back to the office to show off in a kind of like, I told you so, but also now the kitten needs some vaccinations and all this stuff. Can you do this for me? They reconnect. After a short conversation, you know, he asks her out on a date, and that's where we start. The only problem is Xavier is in Minnesota. This is where they are. And Samantha is getting ready to move with her kitten across the country back to California, where she's from, to live with her family because her mother has dementia. They need help taking care of her mother, and they don't know how much time she has left, and she wants to spend it with her family. But they have the best date of their lives. They feel this major connection, and then the next day she moves across the country. And both of them know that doing long distance is a terrible idea. They know it's a terrible idea. They decide it's not worth it. They can't do it, but they also can't stop thinking about each other. And that's how the story progresses. I laughed in this book. I cried in this book. The banter is 10 out of 10. She just knocks it out of the park for me. And I gave this book 5 out of 5. So that was my last 5-star book for the month. I loved it. It was a great note to go out on. So in total, I completed 13 books, but I also started a 14th. So the final book that I started is for my physical reading challenge. I have a goal to read 1 physical book a month. I got a late start in April, so I didn't finish it, but I did start The Handmaid's Tale, and I will finish it. And I've picked out a new one for May. If you haven't already seen my May TBR video, check that out. I will link it here in the end cards. And yeah, so The Handmaid's Tale will be included in my May wrap up. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with my month. I had a really great reading month. I hope that you found a new book to read this month from this wrap up. If you've read any of these books or you plan on putting any of them on your TBR, let me know down in the comments. And yeah, go make sure you check out my TBR video for May and like, subscribe, do all the things. You know what to do. Love you guys so much. And I will see you guys very soon.